Sponsored by War Thunder. More on that later.
The greatest game of all time is Yakuza 0. Awesome gameplay, a total tearjerk of a story starring these gang guys and this blind girl who turns out to be the daughter of... You don't want to hear about the greatest game of all time. No. What you want to hear about is Team Fortress 2. You know, the game that has been pretty much unplayable for the last 3 years with dwindling hope for the future. TF2 doomerism is sort of an inevitability when you're a part of the community for long enough. While the TF2 community often retains a positive and often naive outlook due to the constant revolving door of new players, people who have had TF2 be a part of their life for over a decade, like myself, find it increasingly difficult to believe that the Team Fortress 2 of today is going to see any better days moving forward. This is why a lot of people like myself have been more so looking towards the past now. Over the last year, I've gained somewhat of an obsession for the 2007 to 2011 era of Team Fortress 2, aka anything before the game went free to play in June of 2011. I've started to collect old YouTube videos from the time, and I've been reading old blog posts and forums, and I generally have just completely immersed myself in finding out as much as I can about an era of TF2 that has always stayed super fuzzy in my memory. I only started playing the game 2 years later in 2013, but before I had a computer that could run TF2, I would spend hours upon hours of my life watching YouTube videos on it as far back as 2009. It's an era of the game that has always looked appealing to me, a brief window of time where TF2 was simple, infinitely appealing, and it felt like the game could go in any direction as nobody really had any set expectations for TF2. I'm far from alone in feeling like this, but unlike me, others actually decided to do something about it. 2014, New Year's Eve, a group of dedicated fans would launch Team Fortress 2 Classic, a leaked 2007 build of TF2 that provided a simple and refreshing respite from the already bloating Team Fortress 2. This, of course, got shut down rather quickly by Valve, because it was just a leaked, unsupported version of a game they're still actively working on, fearing that it could jeopardize the base game of TF2, though by this point, the seeds have been planted. Fast forward to 5 years later in 2020, Team Fortress 2 Classic would return in full swing, with their first ever major update, now manned by a more organized group of developers, giving themselves the name of Aminoma. The mission had changed for Aminoma. Rather than hosting a previously existing version of TF2, the project grew to be an ambitious reimagining of TF2's 2008 to 2009 era. It's similar to the newly forming craze around Minecraft alternate reality mod, where they take an old version of the game and try to take it in a different and fresh direction to create an alternative timeline version of the same game. TF2 Classic is no different in that regard, with a plethora of re-implemented cut content, but even more so brand new, never-before-seen content. TF2C strives to be a version of our beloved TF2 that went down a different route than the one we are oh so familiar with today. Today, we're going to be taking a close look at Team Fortress 2 Classic, examining what it does so differently than base TF2 to see whether it truly is a TF2 version worth playing. What is so different about TF2C? Well, where to start? From smaller things like better performance, UI, and overhauled visuals, to the more extreme like brand new game modes, weapons, and an absolute lack of any and all cosmetics. The best way to cover this game would be to start from its biggest additions and work our way down. So, without any further ado, let's start with the brand new game modes. With a whopping 13 and counting game modes to offer, this game of course has your standard Koth, Payload, CTF, and even now abandoned game modes like Arena see frequent play, which was a genuine surprise. As great as vanilla TF2 game modes are, mostly, TF2 Classic has 2 brand new major game modes that majorly shake up how you play the game, being VIP and 4-Team. So let's take a quick look at them. VIP was actually a game mode within the original Team Fortress Classic. It focuses around a special VIP class. The VIP is a player-controlled class that can't do much on his own and must be protected and escorted to objectives by one team, while the other tries their best to take him down. VIP is a special case place within Team Fortress's wider history, as it was a beloved game mode in TF1, which was then continually hinted at being worked on for TF2. I've spoken to a bunch of people who were big fans of TF Classic who then moved on to TF2, and the common consensus was, at the time, that Valve was going to release a VIP game mode for TF2. It was treated as a given, as only a matter of time before it would happen. But as we know, over 17 years later, that wasn't the case. VIP instead became the now famous Payload, and TF2 hasn't looked back since. So here's where Team Fortress 2 Classic comes in with their VIP game mode. Taking clear inspiration from what came before, TF2C's VIP game mode works much in the same way. The blue team is in charge of protecting a civilian who is a short, fat, useless rich guy, with a well-performed but equally snotty voice to match.
Let's get to the fun part. Let's teach them a lesson. If we live, you all get paid double. Except you, engineer. If I survive, you all get a 5-cent raise.
I'm over here stroking my dick.
The VIP, as TF2's 10th class, earns his place within the other 9, matching their cartooniness and art style perfectly. Our beloved VIP then has to take objectives to win the game, all the while Red Team focuses solely on killing him, as every time the Civvy dies, a bunch of seconds get removed off Blue's timer.
Civvy's weak. Civvy sucks.
Oh,
Civvy sucks. Civvy sucks.
Shit!
I did it. I did it. Clear.
Now, the Civillian isn't completely useless. He gives a passive boost to everyone near him, as well as a special ability, which allows him to give any teammate mini crits for a short amount of time. So, is it fun? Well, it really depends. One major flaw of the VIP game mode is that a lot of its enjoyment hinges on the person playing the VIP. Now, if you're lucky enough to have an incredibly charismatic civilian who knows how to rally his team to victory, you're going to have a genuinely great time. But on the other hand, if you get a VIP that's a complete braintoid who refuses to communicate and keeps rushing in and dying, you're gonna be miserable. Thankfully, voting on switching the VIP is really easy, and this game's community is friendly enough to make switching the VIP a pleasant experience. But more on this game's community later. So was Valve right to scrap VIP in favor of Payload? Well, I'm not here to make a claim that VIP is better than Payload, because it frankly isn't. But I do want to say that VIP definitely earns its place amongst the other game modes, and helps the game find its own identity, separate from its predecessor. I guess it's time to talk about the really big one. The game mode that people often attribute to being Team Fortress 2 Classic's thing. TF2C has a subsection of game modes that fall under the umbrella of 4 teams. As you might have guessed, this means that on top of the red and blue team, there's also a green and yellow team. This 4-team division is used on specifically made maps, often under the Arena, Domination, or Koth game modes. As you may imagine, how good of a match you're gonna have in 4 teams heavily hinges on your teammates. It's still 24-player lobbies, so now there's 6 people on one team, and there's 18 enemy players in one match that you have to look out for. I'm just gonna say, gameplay-wise, 4 teams is not my favorite. While you can still have a great match from time to time, most matches are abysmally unfun. If you thought regular TF2 was unbalanced, then you ain't ready for this, because there's usually going to be 1 or 2 teams that are playing either super coordinated or with the most annoying bullcrap strategies possible, making it miserable for everyone else. I'm not a big fan of 4 teams, but, you know, it can always be worse. As a sort of closing thought, I think a game mode where no matter what, only a fourth of the lobby will feel the thrill of a victory in the end, is just a bad idea. I think that's enough negativity though. You should keep in mind that 4 teams is such a small part of TF2 Classic as a whole. It only has a handful of maps, and it's often RTV'd as soon as it starts. Even then, TF2 Classic has so many game modes that it hardly matters. I didn't even mention the Domination game mode, which has maps with a bunch of control points, which depending on how many your team has captured, contributes to your counter rising faster. Around 100 points to win. It's good fun, and when ran on 4 teams, it makes the game mode slightly more bearable, personally. Even then, game modes like Arena see a lot of love, and you can even get into functional matches of Hydro. So TF2 Classic often shines a light on the parts of TF2 that have been really forgotten. And even then, TF2C has so many brand new maps for existing game modes that you're always bound to be running into something refreshingly new. I won't exhaustively list every map, but for instance, a recent update added PL Jin, which was a really pretty and extremely fun payload map that hasn't been seen before. Stepping away from pure gameplay talk, I want to touch on the fact that this game just looks so pretty. The best way to describe it is that this game looks the way you think TF2 looks. The entire lighting system is completely retooled to look like those old TF2 trailers, sharp shadows and saturated colors, making every model shine so much more. Speaking of shine, each weapon has so much more detail, where sometimes I found myself just dumbfounded staring at my weapon. Maps look prettier too. Existing maps often have retooled lighting, like how Dust Bowl really feels like it's set in a harsh desert. You can almost feel the sun burning onto your skull. New aesthetics like VIP Badwater being set at night really makes you look at these environments in whole new ways. Map makers often add life to these maps as well, because sometimes you can see these scientist dudes working on something in inaccessible areas, making these maps feel so much more alive. It's small things like that, along with the actual major quality of life changes like better particles and infinitely better performance, which make TF2 Classic shine as brightly as it does. Speaking of better performance, TF2C just feels so much better as a whole. The menus are genuinely visually pleasing, concise, and even small things like backpack icons for the weapons have so much care put into them that it's really easy to just think that this is an official Valve product. There's even a custom soundtrack. In fact, you're listening to it right now. As an example, a tiny jingle loops on the class select screen, and come on, you gotta admit that this is a really cool intro screen. This game oozes so much soul from each and every nook and cranny that it's honestly baffling that this game hasn't become an official Valve product yet. Now I want to touch on TF2 Classic's arguably most exciting part. The weapons.
For that though, this video is sponsored by War Thunder, aka the ultimate vehicle combat game. It's free on PC and consoles, and guess what, Buster? You get to command over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships spanning 10 major nations. From the 1920s to modern warfare, all of this is, keep in mind, deeply customizable with camos, markings, and decoration. So why not join the other 70 million players worldwide in PvP battles of sheer awesomeness? Immerse yourself in realistic graphics, authentic sound effects, and unmatched content. My personal favorite part of War Thunder is the fact that it's well optimized and runs well even on lower end PCs. War Thunder's free on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, and get this, they're providing you a special deal if you haven't played in the last 6 months or at all, because if you use the link in my description or the pinned comment, you get multiple premium vehicles, an exclusive vehicle decorator, this includes the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. It's only available for a limited time, so make sure you get there lickety-split. Thank you, War Thunder. Now back to the video.
TF2 Classic does away with almost all of modern TF2's unlock. Keyword almost, as some of these are just so iconic that they rightfully earn their place within this game's reimagined world. Besides all the stock weapons, returning in this mod we have the beloved Gunboats, Flare Gun, Sandwich, Kritzkrieg, Huntsman, and the Ubersaw, which is actually reworked slightly into the Uberspritze, which still has the busted upside of 25% Uber per swing, but does away with the useless swing speed penalty and adds on a much more impactful minus 10 max health akin to the Vitasaw of base TF2. Now at first glance you might be seeing this as a bad thing. For instance, my first thought was, why aren't all the 2008 era weapons present? Where's the KGB, an extinguisher, and Blutsauger, and Natasha? Yeah, I'm starting to get it. TF2C as a reimagining avoids downright annoying and bad weapons like the Natasha and the whole of Demo Knight. Fun weapons like the KGB and Extinguisher get really fun reimaginings that take the basic ideas of those weapons and make them way more fun, but more on that later. From the weapon selection from base TF2, we can already surmise that this mod focuses on the essentials. All of these are incredibly simple on paper, but majorly spice up the slot it's in. And you'll see that more as we get into the brand new additions. So without further ado, our first unique side grade is the nail gun for Scout, taken directly from an orange box reveal trailer. The nail gun replaces the scattergun's reliable single fire shots with an automatic flurry of projectile nails. They're similar to medic syringes, but much faster and dealing a lot more hurt per nail. It's a Scout side grade, the likes of which we haven't really seen yet on the guy, trading in your close range effectiveness for mid-range effectiveness, and I gotta say, it's fun. While it doesn't have the sick fraggage potential of the scattergun, it can still be really useful in a lot of situations, especially when it comes to choke points and closed off areas where Scout doesn't exactly excel. It's also surprisingly effective on buildings, allowing you to dish out a lot of damage while staying in range where you can still consistently focus the buildings, but not die instantly. It takes a lot of time getting used to it, since you have to switch your Scout mindset from precise aiming to rough tracking. Once you get a hold of it though, the nail gun provides a really refreshing take on the typical Scout. And then we have the brick, based off arguably TF2's funniest YouTuber. The brick is, well, just that. Throwable brick projectile for the Scout that deals knockback when thrown. Think of it as the guillotine, but instead of inflicting bleed, it just hits really, really hard. Pairs well with the nail gun and has an added benefit of dealing knockback to Ubered players, which comes in handy more times than you think. Soldier only gets one brand new weapon, the RPG. Simple premise. The rocket does a lot more damage, but you only have one before you need to reload. Oh, and it also travels in a slow, predictable arc, so watch out for that. Now, by the sounds of it, this sounds a little boring. Trust me when I say that the RPG is a total blast, pun intended. Having a big rocket that goes boom is a ton of fun in of itself, but the curved projectile shakes up the way you play Soldier in a subtle but much appreciated way.
Too busy.
Oh my god! No, okay.
Too busy playing 3 different. Why is
Did you hit the clip? Did you hit the clip?
Clip!
Allowing you to hit targets you aren't directly looking at. Another smaller thing is that this big rocket also sends you flying further than a regular rocket would. So it's not like you can't do the usual Soldier thing of going deep into enemy lines with a well-done rocket jump. I find myself pairing it a lot with the shotgun, often using the shotgun as my primary by baiting people into engagements, and then I pull out my big boom launcher and take them by surprise. Just be careful of pyros though, these rockets are laughably easy to reflect. Speaking of pyro, he gets the force of nature, but yeah, it's called a twin barrel. The comparison to the fan is immediate, as it's a shotgun with one shot in the barrel and it deals knockback to enemies and yourself. That's right, you can turn Pyro into a movement machine. With this knockback, you can pretty much move as fast as Scout around the battlefield. It tackles a problem that TF2 was grappling with for a very long time. How do you give Pyro a fun mobility option? A class that's designed to close the distance and be the one to initiate engagement, they usually don't have any good means of doing that without just WM1. Valve has tried with both the detonator and the thermal thruster to give Pyro a great movement option, but the results are debatable. Twin barrel, to me, feels like an obvious evolution of detonator jumping. It takes the worst parts of it, aka taking damage while doing it and needing to be near a surface to jump, and takes them out of the equation completely. Then it addresses the worst part of the detonator, the fact that dealing damage with it is just kinda useless, replacing the pitiful chip damage with powerful meat shots that could honestly rival Scout in burst damage effectiveness. So as you can surmise, giving Pyro a force of nature was actually a very good idea. You'd think that after making the greatest Pyro unlock since the flare gun, this game would flunk with its next unlockable Pyro melee, but you are dead wrong. The Harvester's mechanic is closely tied to Afterburn. Basically, while you are dealing Afterburn to someone, or you kill someone who still had some Afterburn time on them left, holding out the Harvester allows you to replenish health, and more importantly, charge up a meter that, once fully charged, Allows you to do a devastating guaranteed melee crit. The name of the game is keeping people on fire at all times. When paired with the flamethrower and flare gun, you switch into this alternative style of play where you stalk the enemy team from the shadows, often retreating to heal up after a skirmish, and then, once your charge is at full, slash! Just know that your more passive playstyle will not go unchallenged. As the Harvester's one downside is that when you perish, everyone you've been flaming is immediately extinguished. This seems inconsequential at first, but the downside is actually a psychological buff to your enemies, because now that they know that they can save themselves from your afterburn by just pouncing, they become a lot more aggressive, often to your own detriment. So you have to be really careful when engaging. I love this weapon. It plays with afterburn in a way that is different from, say, the Extinguisher. Moving on to demo, you might know that in the War update, Soldier and Demo players competed against each other to see who out of the two classes would get the then elusive but now iconic gunboats. Now obviously the Soldier won in the end, but in TF2 Classic, we're finally given a chance to see how it would look like if it were otherwise. Replacing your primary, the gunboats work identically to the way they work on Soldier. And I gotta say, yeah, I mean, it works. Demo's sticky bomb launcher is his primary anyways, and this genuinely gives him a lot of mobility in a way that makes sense, unlike what Valve decided on when they created the abomination called Demo Knight. I don't have much else to say on the gunboats for demo. It just works. Now here's my favorite Demo Man unlock in TF2C, the Dynamite Pack. Based off TF2's initial trailer where the Demo Man was seen throwing a stick of dynamite. The way it works is that you chuck the dynamite pack, it explodes, which sends these smaller sticks of dynamite flying, which they then explode too. It's a really good alternative for the stickies, especially when you're playing on offense, as you can chuck the dynamite into chokes or enemy clusters. Now I gotta say that it's pretty easy to counter. NG can simply hit it with his wrench to disable it. Pyro can simply extinguish the dynamite candles or reflect it back at you in the first place. Still though, it's a lot of fun to use. The only big downside being that you don't really have a way to blast jump anymore with it. But if you ask me, that's a fair trade-off. Now after hearing me glaze the game for however many minutes now, you might be surprised to hear that there's a weapon I really don't like. The Mine Layer is a sticky bomb launcher that in exchange for not being able to detonate the stickies yourself, they detonate automatically when an enemy stands near them. I will admit that it's effective on defense and allows you to place more traps and focus more on your grenade launcher. The concept itself just doesn't sit right with me. Killing someone with the Mine Layer doesn't feel like much of an accomplishment at all. The hands-on approach of the other secondaries is much more satisfying to use. I'm a big fan of using it, and it's so obvious that I rarely ever get killed by it, so it's not the end of the world. Don't think we're done with good weapons though, as Heavy receives a single-fire hit-scan minigun in the form of the anti-aircraft cannon. This gun is so badass, you basically shoot hit-scan explosions wherever you aim. As if that's not cool enough, it deals mini-crits on airborne enemies, much like the direct hit does in base TF2. While it's not outright better than stock in all situations, it still provides a really fun way of playing Heavy, where you think about how you place your shots a lot more than you would otherwise. Moving on from that, the killing gloves of boxing are a classic 2008 TF2 staple, but they've always had a glaring flaw. The strict time limit on when you have crits is just too harsh. Doesn't make for good strategizing. You just have to hope that there's more enemies close to the one you just punched into oblivion. But TF2C's Chekhov's punch, on the other hand, is all about strategizing. The way it works is whenever you hit someone with your melee, you store a crit for later. This crit can then be used on your shotgun, minigun, or even the melee itself if you hit the limit of 3 stored crits. You have to be careful though, as this melee makes it so that any melee damage received is always a crit. And with those big chains visible around your arms at all times, enemies will know your weak spot and will abuse it no matter what. Pairing it with a shotgun is obvious, but there's also the anti-aircraft cannon, where you can set up a really devastating crit blow, which are always so satisfying. It's a great evolution of the KGB. which is becoming an overarching theme of these weapons. Moving on to the engineer, the coil gun is a brand new NG pistol that shoots projectile shots that do 25 damage a pop. But then you can also charge up your shot, which makes it do 3 times more damage and ricochet off walls. Don't think it ends there though, as if you hold down the charge for long enough, it sends you flying up into the air via an explosion, giving you a boost in mobility as well. It stands toe-to-toe with the pistol, though I much prefer the coil gun's consistency over the pistol's spray and pray mentality. Now here comes an actual big engineer change, a brand new building. The jump pad PDA replaces your teleports in exchange for 2 cheap, unupgradable jump pads. And man, I love these so much. When the update that introduced them launched, everyone in every server was so hyped to try them out. And for good reason. Jump pads provide NG and his team brand new ways of traversing the map. When you jump on one of these, it sends you flying the way a perfectly executed rocket jump would every single time. And if you place them well, you can allow yourself and your team to pretty much sync jump around the map. The jump pads thrive in environments like King of the Hill, where keeping an active teleporter is pretty much impossible. While not nearly as powerful as teleporters, if you're using them to get to the battlements faster or to reach high up areas, these bad boys will never let you down. For medic, instead of the crossbow, we get a melee equivalent in the form of the shock therapy. It has a charge meter that, when full, allows you to hit your teammates to instantly fully overheal them. Or, alternatively, hit your enemies to instantly kill them. If they're 100 health or under, that is. Not much else to say on the shock therapy. It's definitely the first medic melee to actually be as good as the Uber Saw. Saving your patience last second with a well-timed melee swing is super satisfying. With Sniper, I'm gonna be honest, I was never really much into playing the guy. I love the Huntsman, but regular Sniper just isn't for me, which might be part of the reason why the brand new Sniper primary, the Hunting Revolver, didn't really click with me. It has no scope or charge, functioning more as a spy revolver but tacked on Sniper. It also bumps him up to 150 health. It's not too bad. Once I tried using it in a gun spy kind of way, I realized it could be a lot more fun than I anticipated. But then again, I'm not much of a sniper guy, so getting headshots with it was a rare sight for me. Sniper gets a really cool melee as well that basically knocks enemies back and inflicts bleed, without doing a whole lot of damage. It's a nice pair with the Huntsman, which is why I got a lot more fun out of using it. It's a nice alternative to stock when you find yourself in a more mobile playstyle compared to the Sniper's usual sit back, do nothing cunt playstyle. Finally, we move on to the best class, the Spy. He gets 2 new weapons this time around, starting with the Tranquilizer Gun. Tranq Gun has been a popular speculated spy weapon since the game's release. Here it is in TF2 Classic, fully realized. The Tranq Gun shoots a projectile dart that makes your opponent's vision black and white, which is, surprise surprise, very detrimental in a color-based game like TF2. It also makes them slower and hit softer, but that's not all. It then also makes any melee attack against them a guaranteed crit. You can either coordinate with a teammate to get them up close and cash in a huge crit, or you can go for the patented strat of trank and flank, where you tranquilize your target and then butter knife them to death. It's a lot more fun than it sounds. Then we move on to the new Invis Watch. The Les Compet is this game's answer to the Dead Ringer. Instead of faking your death, it makes you as fast as a scout when cloaked at the expense of an insanely fast cloak drain. It's a fun traversal mechanic and, more importantly, an escape tool, as you trade the flexibility of the Invis Watch for a more aggressive type of watch, which I found myself having a lot of fun using. And those are all the new weapons in TF2 Classic. Now, if you want to know all about the custom community weapons made for this game, I'm leaving it to the best TF2 YouTuber on the platform, Vane Custom Weapons. As for non-custom weapons, I love nearly all of these, and each of them is as fun as the last. The developers behind this game take good care to keep balanced and consistent, and it really shows. Each weapon is simple to comprehend, but provides you with hours of enjoyment and tech to discover. Do I think these weapons would work nearly as well if added into base TF2 right now? Hard to say. But they work perfectly within the design of TF2 Classic, and I genuinely can't wait to see what weapons the developers cook up next. And finally, I want to touch on something a little more personal. This game really feels like it has something that TF2 has been missing for a very long time. It may be the fact that I can join a vanilla server without needing to queue or having to worry about bots joining my lobby. Maybe it's the plethora of new toys to play around with, or the fact that there's fun custom achievements that beckon you to try and go for them. Maybe, and most majorly, it's the feeling of a major update as well. In my last upload, I mentioned that TF2 players who haven't experienced a major patch are missing out. But the truth is, it's all here. Recently, as in April of 2023, Aminoma released TF2 Classic's second major update, the Fight or Flight update, and it was just, lack of a better word, magical. Deeply nostalgic, too. The hype in the community was palpable as all of us eagerly awaited each day to drop. I would read all the fun text and look at the high-quality renders and hype myself up about trying them out. It took me back to a simpler time, a time like 2014 when I was still a kid and didn't have a care in the world, constantly refreshing the Love and War update page, just waiting for day 2 to arrive. Truth is, it doesn't really matter what I say about the weapons or game modes or anything like that, when the best part of TF2 Classic is how it feels to play. With a relatively small player base, you're bound to start running into regulars. The people who play on these servers are always so polite and fun to be around, and I often find myself chatting about random stuff with randos well into the night. People often lament about not being there to see TF2 in its prime, not being able to experience the best version of Team Fortress 2. But the truth is, the best version of TF2 is already here, and it's just a couple clicks away. Don't deny yourself of the actual most fun you can have online. So, I hope to see you there. Thank you.
The video isn't done yet, but I want to thank War Thunder for sponsoring, and I want to remind you that you can use my code to get free premium vehicles, a decorator, and 100,000 coins, and 7 days premium by clicking the links below and joining the fight on War Thunder. Free on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation.
Well, glad I got that all out there. Hold on, what's this? Open Fortress. Dude, this looks so awesome! Bee hopping? New maps? Deathmatch? I should have made a video on this instead, what the hell? Oh well, maybe in some other universe where I'm a screaming British manchild. What? Turns out this was a part 1 of 2 videos where we covered TF2's most popular source mod. Do I dare click on the icon or alternatively tap on the screen with my mobile device? I'm sure taking my time to decide here. Yep. Do I dare click? Time is in fact ticking. Guess not.